This is purely a journalistic point of view. Nothing more has been said in this video other than that of which has been reported by various media sources and backed up with sources seen at the end of this video.
Few wrestling families have been as celebrated or as notorious as the Von Erich family, a dynasty of brothers who drew huge crowds in their father's Texas promotion. The second-generation sons of wrestler Fritz Von Erich were popular stars in his world-class championship wrestling, who showed much promise, including future NWA World Heavyweight Championship reigns. As the years progressed, tragedy would strike the family time after time, and by 1993, 5 of the 6 brothers were dead, leading fans and others to question whether the family was cursed. Join us now as Behind the Titantron examines the Von Erich curse. Born Jack Adkisson, the man who would terrorize babyfaces as German heel Fritz Von Erich during the 50s and 60s. In 1969, Fritz assumed control of Texas big-time wrestling promotion, following the death of business partner Ed McLemore. Fritz promoted himself as a top babyface and attained political power behind the scenes, getting elected to the NWA presidency in 1975. Although Fritz enjoyed main event success during his career, he never won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. However, he was determined to make sure the next generation of Von Erichs achieved that goal. Some question Fritz's determination, and it is arguable it contributed to his son's problems later on in life. In the book Wrestling Babylon, writer Irv Muchnick commented on how Fritz Von Erich raised his sons. A close observer describes his paternalistic style as hands-on. Fritz is a very aggressive, physical guy. When you saw him with the boys, there was always a lot of hugging and displays of raw affection. But he was also very strict. It was all yes sir and no sir. He ruled the roost with an iron hand. Over time, some would question Fritz's positive and negative influence on his sons. Big-time wrestling featured a number of stars, but Fritz focused on making his sons the center of the promotion. Oldest son Kevin Von Erich debuted in 1976 and would be the first of several in the Von Erich clan to work for his dad. Wrestling promoters often use their sons, regardless of wrestling talent, but a look at the Von Erich boys' work suggests they all had varying degrees of talent, ranging from average to above average. Brothers Mike, Kerry, David, and Kevin won over the fans. Youngest Chris Von Erich would wrestle briefly, guaranteeing Papa Fritz a core group of babyfaces he could count on for his territory. Fritz was by no means the first promoter to use family members, even a brood the size of the Von Erichs. Thousands of miles up north, Stu Hart, who ironically helped train Fritz, used his many sons for his Stampede wrestling promotion. Like the Harts, the Von Erichs had varying degrees of talent, with some being potential main eventers and others more in a supporting role. While fans are familiar with the Von Erich brothers Kevin, David, Kerry, Mike, and Chris, they may not know there was a 6th brother, Jack Jr. Born on September 21, 1952, Jack Jr. died on March 7, 1959, in a freak accident when he was electrocuted during a rainstorm and fell into a puddle of water, drowning to death. This would only be the beginning of a long line of tragedies to plague the Von Erich family. Conventional wisdom has it that the Von Erichs only wrestled in their father's promotion, benefiting from nepotism, but finding no success elsewhere. Any discussion of the Von Erichs needs to address this. The Von Erichs did wrestle outside of Texas, and brother David was seen as a future main eventer, having worked in Georgia Championship Wrestling from Florida, Sam Munchnick's St. Louis Wrestling Club, and All Japan Pro Wrestling. Kevin Von Erich worked in St. Louis also, and even made a one-time appearance in Madison Square Garden in 1980, defeating Johnny Rodz. Not to be outdone, Kerry wrestled in the Garden that same year, and would later work full-time for the WWF as the Texas Tornado. While the Von Erichs did focus on working their dad's promotion, they were seen as stars outside Texas. As for the promotion itself, Fritz von Erich made moves to build World Class into a top-of-the-line company. In 1982, Fritz renamed Big Time Wrestling to World Class Championship Wrestling, setting out to make World Class live up to its new name. As Max Levy writes, the renamed promotion had a revolutionary, high-production values TV program taped with 6 cameras, high-quality lighting, state-of-the-art graphics, full instant replay capabilities, and interview and personality profile pieces that were largely unheard of at the time for a professional wrestling program. Furthermore, World Class's production team employed promotional tools such as music videos and entrance music. Certainly, World Class wasn't the first promotion to use them, but they used them well, adding to the fans' enjoyment. World Class also enjoyed a wider audience thanks to its airing in syndication, including international syndication, and on the Christian Broadcast Network. 1982 saw World Class experience its hottest program, the superbly crafted angle which led to the fabulous Freebirds' heel turn against the Von Erich family. The famous turn occurred on Christmas night during a steel cage match, where Kerry Von Erich challenged Nature Boy Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, with Freebird Michael Hayes serving as special referee and Freebird Terry Gordy serving as enforcer outside the door. As detailed in the book Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the Freebirds debuted as babyfaces. The story was that David Von Erich had befriended them while in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Brother Kerry now had the chance to wrest the belt from Flair, and it would be the Freebirds who would prevent Flair's usual chicanery. With an even playing field, Von Erich had no doubts he'd win. Unfortunately, things turned out differently, as Hayes confronted Flair during the match, knocking him to the mat with a punch. When Von Erich refused to cover Flair and take the easy win, Hayes began arguing with him. Things escalated until Terry Gordy slammed the cage door on Von Erich, guaranteeing Flair's victory and igniting the promotion's hottest feud. The Von Erichs were portrayed as clean-cut, all-American boys with a love for Jesus, Texas, and all that was good, not necessarily in that order. Fritz Von Erich, a professed born-again Christian, wanted fans to see his sons as paragons of virtue. Unfortunately, what happened when the cameras were turned off didn't always match the on-camera ideals. In 1983, Kerry Von Erich would have a potentially damning run-in with law enforcement. As Irv Munchnick details, Kerry and his wife were returning from their honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, when U.S. Customs agents, during a routine inspection, caught him with 18 unmarked tablets in his right front pocket. Inside the crotch of his pants was a plastic bag containing an assortment of nearly 300 other pills, including codeine, diazepam, Librium, and possibly Percodan, 10 grams of marijuana, and 6.5 grams of blue and white powder. The Von Erichs wove the ensuing publicity into the world-class TV storyline, vaguely suggesting that Kerry had been framed by the Freebirds, their arch rivals. Fritz Von Erich was well connected with Dallas's upper crust, so it may not have surprised people when things worked out in Kerry's favor. According to Dave Meltzer's tributes, the evidence somehow disappeared from the police station and all charges were dropped. Irv Munchnick's account is, 18 months later, after behind-the-scenes maneuvering, the charges were dropped by the Tarrant County District Attorney. Whatever the reason, the Von Erichs' reputation remained intact. The Von Erich brothers were all talented, but David Von Erich was seen by many as the best overall wrestler. Wrestling Insider saw him as the heir apparent to the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, possessing the looks, charisma, and wrestling ability to make a claim as a legitimate world champion. Some believe David distinguished himself because he broke free of his father's control. Again, Irv Munchnick examines the Von Erich family dynamic between father and sons, particularly between Fritz and David. As the boys grew older and married, Fritz continued to keep them on a short chain. For years, all of their families lived within a mile or so of their parents. But in 1981, David rebelled. After an argument with his father, David went on the road. During 9 months as a villain on the Florida circuit, he learned all of the psychological tricks of the wrestling trade, working the crowd, calling the spots in a tough match, doing kick-ass interviews with a thoroughness that would never have been possible if he hadn't had the courage to leave Fritz's glowering shadow. When David came back to Texas in late 1982, he was as polished and professional as the Beatles upon their return to Liverpool from Hamburg. David seemed ready to jump to the top, and several sources claim he was scheduled to win the NWA's top prize. Whatever the NWA's plans, they ended on 10th of February 1984, when David died in his sleep while touring Japan. Controversy would emerge regarding David's cause of death. While the medical report stated a ruptured small intestine, rumors alleging a drug overdose continue to this day. St. Louis Wrestling Club booker and announcer Larry Matisick recalled in the book Bruiser Brody, "I know when he, Brody, found David's body. It was him and Joe Higuchi. They went back from the building and found David's body in Japan. I can tell the story now because it's 20 years later. They found the pills and Brody said, what good would it do as far as the Japanese people that thought Fritz was a god to have that? So he flushed them all down the toilet. And Joe knew it, and Joe didn't say a word." Brody's story has been noted by several sources, raising questions about the true cause of death. Irv Muchnick notes, "The Von Erichs have changed their story concerning the cause of death. The Von Erichs say he died of a ruptured intestine caused by a hard lick during a match in Japan. That's obviously false, since David hadn't wrestled there. Nor can we put much stock in the family's other kaleidoscopic accounts, which have included, but are not limited to, A. a stroke, B. a heart attack after a strenuous match, and C. food poisoning after eating sushi." In his 1987 article, Muchnick claims the Von Erichs offered to show him a copy of David Von Erich's autopsy report and death certificate, only to renege. As discussed in our Behind the Titantron episode, The Death of Bruiser Brody, Bruiser Brody was leery of many wrestling promoters. However, Brody was seen as having appreciation for Fritz Von Erich, as Von Erich had helped him get work when other promoters would not employ him. According to Emerson Murray's Bruiser Brody book, Brody had arranged for David to travel to Japan and traveled with him, looking out for him as a favorite of Fritz. It seems possible Brody may have helped Fritz out by covering up the details of David's death. Given the Von Erichs' immense popularity, it was no surprise his death was treated as something akin to a state funeral. Thousands upon thousands of fans bid farewell to their hero. But it would not be long before Fritz Von Erich used his son's death to promote a supercard in Texas Stadium, the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions. The supercard would see a Von Erich finally win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but this moment of glory would be short-lived and symptomatic of the tragedies to come over the next few years. Join us next time for part 2 of our look at the Von Erich curse.